Good morning, good morning. It is a beautiful summer day here in Virginia, and I'm hoping that you're enjoying your day wherever you're tuned in from as well. Everything looks good with the stream. I always like to wait a minute or two to let people get settled in and make sure that you can hear me. So if you let me know that you hear the sound of my voice, that would be awesome. And also, it's a great thing if you want to share with friends and family who are interested in this crazy pursuit of family history and my particular crazy take on it, where the music and the family history intersect. We all do different things with our ancestry, and I certainly never intended to do that with mine, but here we all are. So I'm going to go ahead and roll the picture on in. Here he is. Top of the morning to you. Greetings, Liverpool, and wherever else we're tuned in from this morning. To all of the dads and those who serve as dads, I hope you had a wonderful Father's Day last weekend. It was a pretty special day here, and I hope you were lucky enough to have one that way too. I'm always watching how the YouTube stream is going, and when the encoder is doing what the encoder is supposed to be doing. Let me know that you can hear me okay. I always feel like the volume of this is pushing the encoder a little bit on my end, so I'm going to drop it down just a touch. Hello, Karen. Good morning to Canada. How are you? And it looks like I'm the only American in the lot this morning so far. That's okay. I feel pretty special. Couple of quick things before I roll on to today's content. Cheers to you. Good morning from wee little Lincoln, Virginia. Firstly, thank you for everyone who subscribes to the YouTube channel so you get notice about when these things are going on. I appreciate it very much. Two, if you happen to catch my Gifts in Our Genes workshop back on the 13th, I'm going to be turning that one onto private mode tomorrow. So that's a library program that I'm hoping to be able to market here in the States and around the world if need be. So I'm going to be working with that one for a while. But if you want to go back over that and glean anything out of it, I'm just giving you a little heads up that you might want to do that. And of course, at the end, if I don't remember to say so while I'm playing a song for you, I'm always happy to take questions. Hopefully, I'll have answers. If not here, then later on by email. I can say that tracing our male ancestors is a really interesting subject, and perhaps we get a little bit more excited about it because it's maybe a little bit easier to have more success with it. I cannot offer you any insights into the origin or nature of dad jokes. I'm sorry about that. But we do all have our reasons to be curious about our male ancestors, obviously, and part of it comes with this sort of the source of our name. We tend to kind of like, well, where does your name come from? And the truth is that your name comes from one of your 32 three times great grandparents. Your name comes from one of your 4,096 10 times great grandparents. But chances are pretty good that the name has changed somewhere along the line to protect the innocent, to protect the guilty. There's a whole host of reasons why that happens. So let's kick off today, shall we? Let's go talk about these dads. Let's have a little chat about tracing our male ancestors. And of course, one of the things about our male ancestors is that when you're looking through records, when you're looking for the same surname from one generation to the next, it's usually easier. However, it also may hide the fact that the trail that we're on might not be exactly the trail that we've assumed it is. Sometimes things are not as they have seemed on paper, and that's just kind of part of the the mystery and magic of this whole research and the advent of DNA for genealogy, for sure. We do have a lot of resources. I have some dear family friends who I've been doing a little digging around for them, and I'm reminded when looking outside of my own family how valuable all of these particular resources are, a bit for different reasons. The census records are always hugely important for who's living there under one roof, who might be living nearby, what kinds of work people did. I'm usually a little bit less confident about things like birth dates and immigration dates and things of that ilk. But of course, the census is available here in the States up through 1940, and our next census will be the 1950 census, released the year after next in 2022. But there are lots of other helpful resources. And in helping my family friends, the city directories, many towns and cities here in America during the 20th century would publish these records of who lived where. And it was by last name, and it would include street address and usually the employer and maybe the job. And in this family that I was helping, there was her family and her parents and their jobs, and right across the street was her uncle and his family, and the dear cousin that she grew up with. And this is from 1958. These city directories here tend to be done every year. Over the last couple of live streaminars, I talked about our military records, both the draft cards from World War I and World War II, but also the older military service records that are available. And the fact that often there was some mention of next of kin on there that was useful. And of course, one of the amazing things about the internet is how everything gets put online, and not all of it is behind a paywall. How much we can learn about our male ancestors from obituaries. For instance, a grandparent or even a great-grandparent, if we're lucky enough to find an obituary that someone in the family has saved or has been put online. That's pretty useful and valuable stuff right there. So one of the things that's been helpful with my ancestry across the pond is recognizing that many different religions and ethnicities have certain particular naming patterns or customs. These aren't always hard and fast rules, but generally when you're researching families back in the past, they're larger families, and there are not all of the children surviving to adulthood, and they might reuse a first name in honor of a child who died young on a subsequent child. I know with my ancestry from Scotland and Northern Ireland, for instance, the naming convention is to name the first son after the father's father, and the second son typically after the mother's father. So there's lots of clues that perhaps lead us astray, but oftentimes at least give us a direction to look in, and that's incredibly valuable to us as well. So that's a bit about the record side of it. Let's talk about our modern technology, about DNA and dads. If you have not seen the show, the Genetic Detective is her name, CeCe Moore's show. It's really fascinating. It's basically a lot of application of some of the things that we're talking about in these live streaminars. Of course, she's using them to solve cold case crimes, which is really pretty noble and sometimes soul-wrenching work. But a lot of these techniques that you see her use on her show are things that are readily available to us as well. And when it comes to DNA and dads, we at least have the benefit of some helpful things on our side. But one of the things that people talk about a lot is the Y DNA test, which is your patrilineal line, your father's 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 father's. Because of the nature of Y DNA, which is different from the autosomal tests that we do at, say, Ancestry or 23andMe, Y DNA goes much further back in time for us, genealogically speaking. It's a different kind of DNA that recombines differently. And so it allows us to maybe get farther back, like somewhere between 12, 15, maybe even 20 generations with a little luck and some useful matching with people who also know their ancestry pretty far back into the past as well. One thing that we found when my dad did the Y-DNA test, though, was that oftentimes what has happened is somewhere along the line the name has changed. It has been borrowed, or there is perhaps some other event that has gone on. And so that you wind up finding that you don't match anyone with the name Smith back in the 1600s or anything, and instead you match people with names like Jones or Williams. In our case, we found that our McKnights somewhere along the line probably were Frasers instead, although it is clearly most likely beyond our ability to reach back far enough to find that out. So when we're researching our male lines with standard DNA tests, we generally have a little bit easier time because we have these surnames that don't change with generations in theory. But we still need cousins. You've heard me say that our second cousins are the gold mine of genetic genealogy because they tie us to one set of great-grandparents. And third cousins tie us to a common set of great-great-grandparents. So in my dad's case, one of his family lines, my grandmother's line, my grandmother was what I call an hourglass woman. She was the only one of her siblings who had children, so all of the family DNA went only through her, and it was the same with her mother, which meant that my dad had no first cousins on that side of the family and no second cousins on his maternal grandmother's side of the family, which makes doing the research pretty challenging when you don't have anything that's in that close range where you are depending on those matches. So it is always vital to have those cousins. But there's another element to this that's kind of important too. Our autosomal DNA, what we do at Ancestry or MyHeritage or any of the big testing companies, will also show us if there has been a more recent non-paternity event. In other words, a case of misattributed parentage. I found that with one of my cousins too, when after 2 years of scratching my head about, golly, how is it that you're not matching any of these people who are matching us on this side of the family? And lo and behold, when you look a little farther and there's no matches with someone who's a grandparent, you realize that there's probably a different story here. And sometimes those stories happen for all kinds of reasons. One of my theories is that oftentimes, especially with families who are dependent on their children to help run, say, the farm in the 1800s, and kids were essential, not being able to generate your own kids was a pretty difficult thing. And as there are options today for doing things about that, for childless folks, there were also things that people would do in earlier times as well. But those non-paternity events do tend to show up. You certainly should match your first cousins and your second cousins, and most of the time your third cousins. So sometimes we find that the surname that we're chasing back into the past actually no longer belongs to us genetically. It certainly belongs to our story, but it might not belong to us genetically. So I've got a really valuable hot tip for you today. And having worked with my cousin, an adoptee, on some of this, I can tell you that this is a strategy that helped bring us to some answers fairly quickly, and it's kind of exciting, and it makes a lot of sense. I call this if you've ever seen one of those Russian dolls where you unscrew the head and inside is another Russian doll, and you unscrew the head and inside is another, these nested dolls. I think of this strategy of successive umbrellas sort of like that. And that's my terminology because it made sense to me. But what that really means is, say you don't know one of your great-grandparents, but you know your grandfather, you know his siblings, or at least some of his siblings. The trick is that you take those siblings and you put them on your tree, and you trace them forward towards our time as much as possible. Because typically what you'll find is that some of your closer DNA matches might be coming from one of those lines. And one of the most valuable resources I've found, particularly with my family in Connecticut, is that obituaries in the Hartford Courant have been online for quite some time. And for a great many of my mom's family, which would be her generation, second and third cousins, some of them had elders who passed away in the last 10 or 20 years. And there's their list of grandchildren and great-grandchildren and where everybody lives and who the spouses are. And you can glean an enormous amount of information that way. And I, in fact, have identified probably half of my mom's second and third cousin DNA matches, not because I knew them or because they answered an email or an ancestry message, but because I was able to determine who they were fairly quickly from the information that was in an obituary. So as you build those trees, those will give you clues. And if you can move on to the next umbrella, say the siblings of your great-grandparents, you sort of work your way back in time and build these umbrellas over each generation like that. And typically you can determine who a sizable percentage of your DNA matches are that way, even if they came from someplace else. So that's my hot tip for the day, and I think it's a good one. I would like to believe that there's some value to that for pretty much anyone who's researching their family. So with that being said, I will tell you now that if you have questions, this is a great time to pop them in the chat. And in honor of those fathers, the known and the unknown, I always like to sort of bring my ancestors to life. I like to think about what they would have experienced, because they were real people too. They sat in chairs, they ate food, they did all of these things, and they raised kids, and they did it anywhere on the spectrum between really well and not at all. And so the notion of how we hand things down in our time and from one generation to the next is always ever present. But it's kind of cool to remember that this is something that's part of the human language for probably as long as we've had language. This is called Sons and Fathers. We're all born screaming, naked and afraid. Looking back, it's funny seeing all those plans I made. We'd throw our balls and race our bikes, sometimes dare to dream. Manhood ain't as hard as fathers make it seem. Guess it's just the way of things. We take our place in line, like our fathers and their fathers did when it was their time. Now we're slowly trading places. I suppose those are the rules. For Father Time won't suffer any fools. could not, though we know it's true. Nothing else gets quite as tangled up in knots as sons and fathers do. Now it's my turn in that easy chair. It's the hardest thing I've done. Though any man can take the gig, it ain't for everyone. The have-tos and the must-dos, credit and the blame we earn, hoping what we teach is what they need to learn. Dad, getting out of our own way. Hey, we do not, and we will not, could not, though we know it's true. Nothing else gets quite as tangled up in knots as sons and fathers do. Sons and fathers, mothers and daughters. It's always I like to think of it as the nest is, where you hatch your eggs and you raise your young, and after a while, the young are growing to the point where the competition for space and resources becomes pretty acute. And I think that that sort of always testing yourself against your old man thing is part of that making space in the nest stuff. So my cousin offers up a great question. With the fact that if you don't know your dad, adoptees, this is often the case, the Y-DNA test, you have to have someone who is descended from that same male line. So without knowing something about your paternal line, the Y-DNA test, there's nobody to test. So what you have to do is get to a point where you have identified a male heir who shares somewhere along that point, that ancestry, a common dad of a dad of a dad. So when it comes to the autosomal DNA, yeah, we do definitely have to have some way of determining whether we have some paternal matches in there or not. It's hard to imagine that there aren't any in there, and I would love to take a look at that with you at some point, because I think I could probably help find a few clues by doing so. But we can bandy that about real soon. I would love to help. With that said, I am always grateful that you tune in for these. I hope it's been helpful. I hope that you can take that successive umbrella strategy and put it to some use. And certainly, all of these men in our family have contributed half of our DNA after all, and to find out more about their stories sometimes tells us some really interesting things about our own. So with that said, I've got a handful of things to share with you coming up that will be certainly of interest, I know, to both Kim and Karen. Next time around, in honor of the dual nature of Ireland, I have both the Irish Catholic side and the Ulster Scots of Northern Ireland in my family ancestry, and I've spent a lot of time messing around with both, with mostly great pleasure and occasional consternation about the recycling of first names. That being said, on July 11th, my theme will be the Scots-Irish who came to America and the Ulster Scots, their distant kin who've settled in Northern Ireland. I've also got another concert coming up on July 9th. I'll be doing a full concert from here in the living room. Those are the things that are making up for no tour revenue, because I am here and home with my family, which is wonderful, but I'm not out on the road singing in theaters and small concert halls to people, and that is expensive to not be doing, I can assure you. So I'm very grateful. Oh, Cousin Eileen is here. Look what's on tap for the 11th. We're gonna talk about Northern Ireland, and we'll talk about the Ulster Scots. I'm glad you're here. So at any rate, the next concert on July 9th, I do hope you can come. For those of you who are on the other side of the pond, I will be doing another one of my free Facebook Live Europe-friendly musical Mondays. That would be 4 p.m. our time, and that is a week from this Monday, June the 29th. Wait, that's this Monday. A casualty of quarantine is the calendar. It will be this Monday that I will be singing, perhaps again from my porch like I did last time. If I can manage to work around my neighbor mowing his lawn at just the right time, I may be out on the porch on Monday. And also, of course, the book and the album, we're still shipping them out of here at a great rate. If you know somebody who might appreciate that, I would like to think they make great gifts. Personalized by the author probably devalues them a little bit on eBay, but at least you can say, hey, I know him. So thank you very much for tuning in today. Thank you as always for the generous donations if you're so moved to do so. I do these for free, but I certainly am grateful to help keep the lights on and the family fed and all of that. But most of all, I just hope it's been helpful to you. I enjoy doing these. I enjoy sharing some of the rather remarkable experiences I've had and the mistakes I've made and the things I've learned from them along the way. So hopefully I can save you a little bit of trouble and move it forward. So with that, family and friends and family and fans of genealogy here, there, and everywhere, thank you so ever so much for tuning in. I'll look forward to seeing you real soon, and I look forward to helping Kim break down a very big, important brick wall. We're going to do that together. Take care and have a wonderful weekend.